All right, welcome back to the Recreate Meaning podcast. Today we are trying to condense the content down into half an hour, and we're also going to talk about some stuff that Aaron has seen on Reddit lately. And I'm going to throw it away to Aaron to talk about the first chunk of our topics today.
Yeah, all right. Oh, to give a bit of an introduction, the Reddit is an interesting place because like all social media sort of platforms, it kind of has attracted a certain type of person,
Mm,
and there's a certain type of thinking which has been present on the Australian finance subreddit, which I think is probably doing damage to some people. And I think that we should just sort of get out of the echo chamber a little bit and just sort of address it because sometimes you can hear the same ideas defended, 100 times, and you start to believe them. But then you hear one person say, "What if it's different?" And they just say some slightly different things, and you realize that, oh, it might actually not be true. So,
yeah, which is
but
pretty important considering the first thing that you Google, Reddit pretty much comes up all the time. So it's like,
yeah,
you
exactly, yeah.
gotta be careful.
And interestingly enough, too, this video may even come a little late because the Oz Finance subreddit, when I first started browsing it a little while ago, there were a lot of people saying that property was unaffordable, but now they've had it's kind of like into the comments, the people who are like, no, actually, it is possible. You can do this, you can do that. These people have started moving in and they've started getting some upvotes. And, that's a good thing to see because it looks like reason is sort of starting to take hold there, which is great. But let's just try and give it a little bump along today. So,
Mm,
the first thing we'll talk about the myth of unaffordable property. It it's becoming like a myth. Like everybody's saying, the property market's never been like this in all the years, and you know, properties become so unaffordable. People are saying this, but I don't actually think it's that true, despite the fact that there are unaffordable properties. But what prompted me here was there was an article by the ABC. So two-thirds of Australians believe home ownership is out of the question for young people. Now, this really annoys me because that means that there's young people who are trapped in social circles where every single person's telling them that it's unaffordable for them.
mm.
And if every single person in your social circle, not just it on Reddit, but every single person, because two-thirds of Australians is a hell of a lot of people, is telling you that, you might start to believe it.
Yeah, and,
And
and
then it's
they're not
often
on
the
Reddit
case that the
either.
one third, yeah, exactly. The one third of Australians who believe home ownership is possible for young people, they might not be exactly taking the time to tell people how to do it. So
Mm,
let's sort of let's contrast two types of properties because this is the eternal thing.
mm.
There's the $800,000 three-bedroom apartment, walking distance to the city with a car park, and it has become unaffordable. Some people will manage it, but like I'm not really talking to people who are like, there's like 23-year-olds and they have careers, and you just be like, what the fuck is like? I'm not talking to hospitality people here. Like this is our people. We're in hospitality. Like
Yeah, plus a 800 like an $800 loan is not something that's a
yeah,
big
800 a week. Yeah,
yeah. Like if
yeah,
you're buying
big
a
one.
one bedroom apartment in the city that's walking distance, you better not have a car. You better have a job that it's
Yeah,
just like yeah, it's
yeah.
fucking good luck with
Well,
that.
well, I said three-bedroom apartment
Oh,
too.
three
That
bedroom,
becomes
sorry.
that becomes relevant later.
Yeah.
But there was in Sydney. There are one-bedroom apartments close to these prices and stuff, which is just ridiculous.
Mm,
Like if you're making coffee or food for people for a living, this is unaffordable, I would say.
mm.
And I don't actually have that much of a problem with making coffee or food and food whatever for a living. I actually think that's a fine thing to be doing when you're younger.
Yeah, yeah.
So to contrast that, there's another type of property. There are $250,000 one-bedroom apartments, 25 minutes bus and train to the city with a car park, affordable for most, especially couples.
Hmm.
These are the properties that we can afford. Like, these are the ones for our people, man.
They seem more sensible too. It's just like they're more catered for the needs of an individual who's studying and working rather than having extra empty space. And when you're younger, you don't know how to clean properly, so it's like having less bedrooms is good in that regard. Usually, these properties don't have maintenance outside. Like it's a good warm up.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, yeah. It's very funny because it's quite scary if you buy an apartment like this because there'll be a body corporate and they send you these fucking big stacks of paperwork that just say shit like, you don't know what any of
Mm,
it means, which is so annoying. I still don't know what the body corporate. I like they send me like 20-page documents all the time, and I don't think I've ever read one.
yeah. Well, they send you the general meeting kind of summary, and all you like. I just scan for the word that says fees are being lowered or raised, and I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's it.
go
Um,
team.
but but the rule with the body corporate with the apartment I brought is if it's outside of your the trim on the door, those skirting
Yeah,
boards sort of that keep the door in place. Anything outside of that is the body corporate's responsibility. Anything inside of that is your responsibility.
yeah.
That's pretty cool because you get pretty much anything that happens in an apartment, you should be able to call an electrician, a plumber, or fix it yourself.
Mm,
And then anything on the outside where things maybe get a little bit more structural and stuff like that, you've got this sort of like organized institution to handle it. That's an all right deal. That's pretty good.
yeah,
There are
especially
times
when
it
you're
goes
young.
wrong. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And like, who wants to deal with all the maintenance and all that sort of like,
yeah.
um. But yeah, there are these $250,000 apartments, and in mortgage repayments, you're looking at about 250 a week thereabouts. Um,
Th-
that's
To
pretty affordable.
to viewers that are watching as well, $250 a week for a single bedroom apartment for either you or a couple is probably. Well, I wouldn't even say probably. It's more manageable considering one, you're paying off an investment, and you've got a place to live definitely. And it's compared to rent, it seems like a big number, but it's just not. Like that's the thing that I think is really interesting about this because. And I think in the next two chunks of this discussion, we're going to try and debunk some of these things that could put you in a mindset where buying a $250 one bedroom apartment could be a bad move. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
One of the things I really liked about when I got my apartment was I didn't have a lease anymore, which meant I had that stability, and I didn't have inspections, which I don't know why. Some people aren't bothered by them, but inspections used to stress the hell out of me. Like, if I had an inspection that week, it influenced everything I did at home that week, and it just put me off center. Like, I don't like that. I like to have a little bit more stability.
yeah. Imagine
Um,
imagine having someone come into your house and tell you live like a pig while simultaneously having your life fall apart and have your family hate you. It's like
yeah,
these
yeah,
absurd
very annoying.
hypotheticals.
Um, and yeah, $250 a week, split that between two people, 125 a week. You can afford that sort of thing on hospitality money. The I suppose one thing I'd just say, we'll talk a little bit more about employment later, but if you've got stable employment and you've got enough money to get one of these loans, which 20 grand and a good mortgage broker, they'll make it happen.
Just on that
Um,
note, just while I think about it, paying
yeah,
$125 a week into a savings account will get you to 20 grand in your first couple of years of working. If you're like still at home or in a position where you can do that or you're share homing and stuff like that. So it's like your finances don't necessarily change that much, except your rent moves from rent to a repayment, which is technically you're getting a chunk of that money anyway.
yeah. I
So,
think $200 a week for a year is 10 grand. So $200 a week for 2 years would get you to 20.
Mm.
But $100 each if you're a couple, 2 years gets you to 20, which is that's all right.
Manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, it fucking sucks that initial grind, but either you got to do it or you get lucky enough to not have to do it. But like I did it. It was
Yeah.
fine.
You don't you and like it's it's not what's the word I'm looking for here? If you're doing it as a couple, then awesome. As long as you got the trust behind you. But it's like
Yeah, yeah,
saving $200 a week if you're working in a stable job and you want to get a property like that, or you want to enter yourself into the property market. It's not that hard. All things considered, unless you got. But anyway, if you want, if you're looking at
oh yeah,
your finances and your expenses, there's other videos down below where we talk about this.
yeah, yeah. See, the thing that's funny, it's very very easy, except something will go wrong along the way that will make it very hard.
Mm.
And enjoy your own personal crisis. The life puts like a real personal flavor on it,
Mm.
but whatever.
Mm.
um, another thing, I searched this morning. You can get these $250,000 apartments outside of Sydney and Melbourne still. They're not that close to the city, but they're still out there, and for a vehicle for investing, they're pretty good. They're about as good as you can get when you're younger. Um, there's there's a sort of like a corollary to this type of thinking. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's there's this post on the Oz Finance subreddit where they say this is what a $1 million property looks like in a Melbourne right now, and it's $1 million property that has an awful house on it. It looks just completely run down, potentially even unlivable.
Mm.
And they're kind of saying like, how is this house selling for $1 million? But it's really not the house selling for $1 million. It's the land.
Mm.
Any land close to the city gets this absurd valuation put on it. Um, Part of the reason is because it tends to be that land close to the city, they build multi-story buildings on it, so that you're kind of splitting the land cost across multiple things, as they sort of stack up.
Mm.
Um, so the land costs very close to a city can get absurd, but $1 million house in the city that's run down, that's not the purchase for a young person. That's not what you want. You,
That's
you probably want one of these cheap apartments.
plus that's probably just overall a bad investment decision. If you're a if you're a building company and you buy a $1 million block of land like that and put like 5 units on it, that's a good investment. But like we're not at that point.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
exactly.
that's not the demographic that we're trying to convince that they're being lied to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and and another thing, so a family home is for a family. That's something that people seem to have forgotten in some of these posts. Like a lot of the times they'll say, look at this, this 3-bedroom home, it's unaffordable for an individual. Of course it is. It's a 3-bedroom home. Like, it's supposed to have 3 to 5, whatever. It's supposed to have many people living there. Um, Often it's the case that, especially in suburbs where they start to reach these very, very high prices, there's supposed to be perhaps two working parents living there, and they're supposed to be maybe in their 40s, potentially 50s, well into their careers, and already have quite a fair bit of money behind them.
Mm.
Like if I buy a house for $500,000 today, and by the time I'm 50, I've essentially got it paid off. For me, an $800,000 house is essentially a $300,000 house if that's what I got to borrow.
Mm.
So you can have these places where all the real estate's so damn expensive, but all the people living there just have money behind them.
Mm.
It's not expensive for them because they've already got all the money, and they're living where they want to live for, whatever reason. Maybe it's close to work, or certain lifestyle or close to people like their peers. Like, I don't know, but it's important to look at, like, if you look at a property that's completely unaffordable, but there's 10,000 houses in the area and they're all occupied by someone, clearly there is a way to afford it. And if you can't figure it out, move on. Like, find a place where you can afford, which there's plenty of them, you know?
Mm.
Like, there's these basic properties. I really like the one bedroom apartments. I just think that they're probably the easiest beginning investment you can have, especially if you're young, an individual or a couple, and you don't have pets or children.
Mm.
If you
Plus,
have pets or children, it gets a little bit more difficult, but that's pets and children, you know? That's what it is.
that's the sacrifices that you make. And it's like
Mm,
when you're paying off a one bedroom apartment, your options open up in 4 years once you've completed your degree or whatever you're doing and you've finished
mm,
working part time and you've got a little bit more income behind you, or if you've decided that maybe it's time to move on from the one bedroom apartment, you can sell it, make a couple more a bit more on your deposit. you know it's like a stepping stone, but at the same time it's way better than just paying dead money.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, they hell of a stepping stone, especially if you're fortunate enough to hold it at a time when apartments go up in value. Like, you might pay the minimum on your mortgage for 4 years, and the resulting increase in the price of the apartment gives you enough money to be able to have a deposit for a far better home. Potentially even something like that 80 grand level, where, like, to save 80 grand across 4 years, it's like, what is that? Is that $400 of savings a week if you're going to do it
Yeah.
like manually?
Mm.
To have an 80 grand increase in your net worth come in just because you were paying the minimum on a mortgage, especially when your share of the minimum was $125 a week, like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's how people are doing it. For anyone that's confused as to how people are affording these ridiculous numbers, it's really these stepping stone investments that you just constantly scale up and get people to the point where they can afford. They can go and look at $1 million house and actually seriously say, I think we can buy this. Like, it's the stepping stone investments that gets people there.
Yeah, and it's the small sacrifice that you have to make in getting a one bedroom apartment and being like, okay, this is just going to be me for like a couple of years, like, and it's kind of weird because having an investment like that gives you the ability to play a game where your chances to actually get onto the same game that other people are playing, that are like where you get hit with like this property boom in a suburb and then you're like, oh sweet, I've got an extra 100 grand of equity behind you just because I've got lucky. It's like you get to be able to play that game instead of just being like, I work, I pay rent, and I go to uni, and that's me. It's like you get that extra little bit of risk that can be beneficial or negative to you. But the thing is even if it is negative to you, it doesn't matter because you're still living in the house and nothing's fucking changed. You just wait.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you know?
I have a bit of a laugh because, like, currently I work in hospitality. I have It's like, when I took on the debt for the apartment, they're like, if you don't pay back your mortgage and you have to declare bankruptcy, that sort of puts a negative mark on your credit and all that sort of stuff. And it can make it harder for you to go on and work, other types of jobs and all that. But it's like, I already had no money, and I already had, like, what's like, I don't think anybody, if I apply for another hospitality job, is checking my fucking, like, whether I've ever gone bankrupt. Like, so it's very funny. I almost had nothing to lose. Like,
Yeah. And it's like,
and
if you go and study and you go and get the job that you want, and then they bounce you back because of a credit rating, and I don't know, I that's not an
yeah.
area I'm familiar with.
Well, there are, like, more so when you start your own business. If you want to start, let's say, a contract with a supplier, and you're asking them for 20 grand of stock each month, they'll check your credit history and they'll also
Mm.
find out whether or not you've been in jail and stuff like that. sometimes. Not everyone will do it, mostly the bigger companies. And if you've gone bankrupt and been in jail, sometimes they'll be like, we don't really want to do business with you. It can make it harder to get into business for yourself. But yeah, in general, the dangers of going bankrupt when you're young, I'm not actually sure it's all that. Like, I don't think it would really be that bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'm
like
I'm
there's
probably wrong, but
there's there's something to be said about that too, because if you have a house, right, and you pay it off, you might even have a deposit to buy a business if uni doesn't work out. It's like, but at least you've got
yeah,
that on your side as
yeah,
options.
exactly. Yeah, we should probably
Move on.
we should probably move on before I encourage people to take ridiculous risks.
Oh, that's
There was
part
a
two or
joke
part
that
three?
this is part two, the myth of high rent.
Yeah.
It's funny because rent's at the highest point it's ever been, as it always is.
Mm.
It's quite rare that rent goes down. Um, so there's political and economic troubles, and then there's individual troubles. And you don't want to look at political and economic troubles and sort of conflate them with your position as an individual, because then you end up like what you read in the newspaper, the economy's bad, so you're like, okay, well then I won't, I'll continue to rent this unaffordable house. It's like, what are you doing? Like what's happening in the economy and what's happening in politics. Sometimes it can have a direct effect on you, but in general, you've got to be willing to move as an individual and ignore what's happening in the broader economy, because it just doesn't make sense to look at things on this level in regards to your personal life. Um, like that, they'll talk about GDP and they'll say, the economy didn't grow very much, but that's on average.
Mm.
And it's like, just because the economy didn't grow, like if you were employed the whole time, well then, you could have been saving some money. You could have been moving forward. Like it doesn't, like, it's like, why are you looking at the entire economy for your personal, I don't know, your personal sort of like decision making? It doesn't make any sense. It's a
Well,
very silly way to operate.
it's weird to make decisions based on that if you had a good year working and you saved a bit of money. It seems so bizarre to me that you're saying these words, but I get the fact that other people are listening to it. I'm just so ingrained off it. It's so weird to hear it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
I see it all the time. People will be like, "Oh, this economy, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
Yeah.
you, it's like it's like you. It's weird. But anyway, ignore the headlines. Work within your own life. It's
Mm.
so property prices have increased, which means in general rent has gone up, and it's because people who buy a place on borrowed money, they try to outsource as much of their expenses as possible onto renters. And if the renters are willing to pay, they list the place. They say it's 400 a week. If someone says yes, I'll take it, then that's the price.
Yeah.
And if everyone in that area is renting at that price, that's the market price in that area. Um,
It's not the rent. It's not the people who are renting the property's fault either. It's just you. Just like if you've got a massive debt that you got to pay and you're offering a source to it. Obviously, you want to break even. Or like
well,
even get some
yeah,
money back.
what would you expect them to try to do?
Yeah. It's
Um,
like I wouldn't hate these people. It's like it's not easy. If you
yeah. So I think too, rent is a big expense. Now you should split it with roommates or a partner. Like I really reckon split that rent between as many people as you possibly can, but this is a source of personal trouble.
Mm,
It's like, if you're living in a share house, there's going to be problems that come with that, and you got to navigate those problems, and it's a hassle. Same as trying to split rent with a partner. Like, like romance and finance combined. Ugh. you know?
Yeah,
Like, it's gonna be a source of trouble.
make sure that you've got yourself a situation that you've navigated into that you
Mm.
think that you're going to be able to survive.
Yeah, and that's far more important than what the economy's doing. Like,
In intention to get yourself into a property, like a one bedroom property, like with the intention of making the next step.
yeah, yeah, it's really good to have that in mind. Because yeah, if you can say, if I live here, I can save this amount of money, which means I can leave this place in this amount of months. Fantastic, you can
Mm,
go forward, just like good, eyes open, look at the people you're sharing with. Like, if someone's a drug addict, don't live with them.
yeah.
Yeah, if someone doesn't have a job, don't live with them. If someone can't fucking keep themselves under control, and at 11 p.m. they're out the front crying and they're screaming and they're making all this noise, don't live with them. Fucking filter people like that, because like, there's nothing worse than seeing someone who's too nice to tell people who are too bad to just get out of their life, like.
Mm. It's
And
just
you see this a lot. You see people who are very nice dragged down by people who are just sort of like that. They're never going to get ahead. So don't put yourself in that situation. Like,
it's vital that you don't put yourself in that situation because you owe it to yourself to make sure that you're a stable individual so that way in the future you can help other people.
oh yeah, yeah,
There's a responsibility factor there. Don't live with
yeah,
retards.
yeah. And I think, like, let's say you've got your personal network, maybe family, friends from high school, I don't know, and
Mm,
things are going downhill, and the home situation's insane, and then you start uni or something like that. Maybe roll the dice on living with strangers.
yeah.
As scary as that may be, if you know you're in a bad situation, maybe roll the dice. Like, it's it's shitty, it's so fucking hard to navigate that early part of life, but you've got to know when to get out of a bad situation.
Absolutely. With
Um,
with
you're right,
the
you go.
with the intention of setting yourself up for stability, you know?
Yes. This is the next thing too. So it is an unstable economy always. People say now's unstable. They were saying it was unstable 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's always as bad as it's been, and all of that. Like, it's very easy when you're young and you start reading the news and you don't have 10 years of reading the news behind you to be like, oh my god, everything's terrible. But like, I guarantee you, in 20 years, the news will be saying it's as bad as it's ever been, and maybe it will be about what it is now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
People will always talk about doomsday, you know?
yeah, exactly. And so jobs are created and destroyed all the time.
Mm,
The economy is kind of people and businesses competing, and whoever does the best, they get to continue to survive. Sometimes they don't even do well, they just continue to survive. And whoever does the worst goes out of business. And sometimes you can be the unfortunate employee in a who loses their job because the business lost.
mm.
And that can happen. Like, you're just the person who puts the stuff on the shelves and serves the customers, and then you got no job anymore. Even though you did a fine job, nobody wants to buy water beds anymore. Like, that happens.
Yeah. That's just a roll of the dice. It's not
I always,
anything.
yeah, 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 that happens. There's a waterbed store still operating. I don't know what the suburb is. I drive past it sometimes on my way to and from the city, and I'm always like, how? Like,
Fucking things need to be serviced or some shit. Like
we should go there. We should do an episode there.
out the front.
Yeah. Um.
All right.
So if you lose your job because of, let's say, they sometimes they say friction in the economy,
Mm,
um, there's probably not going to be any help for you with that. The government may say they're going to help, but even if what they do, Like, apart from probably the best thing they can do is just give you some money. Like, but even if they do that, it's still not the help that you need. Sometimes it can help get you through the week, which is fantastic. But if you lose your job, you gotta get back into somewhere where you can generate some income for yourself. That's really what you got to be doing.
Yeah.
Don't don't go all in on government help because it's probably not going to be as helpful as you want it to be.
Nah, it's always going to be annoying. They don't make it easy. And for good reason, probably.
Yeah. So you just got to focus on becoming competitive. That's the absolute main thing.
Hmm.
It's like, you're a person, you're going to go in to get jobs, you're going to be interviewing, competing against other people. You've got to be competitive in that situation and choose a choose a fight you can win, like
Hmm.
it's good to apply for better jobs, high jobs and all of that. But don't be afraid to apply for jobs that will just get you through for a while because you really want to be working. You don't want to spend long periods of time unemployed.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that you'll just get left behind and you won't be able to have options or chances to, play those long term risk kind of games.
Yeah. And
Mm.
if you can become really competitive, you can actually influence the business itself to become competitive, which will help keep you in the job for a long enough time. And if you're somebody who's competitive on that level, you'll rise.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, split the rent with roommates or a partner. We've said that. The other option too for reducing the cost of rent is to just work more to, you know, make rent less of your income by increasing your income by working more hours. You can pursue higher paying work, which is good. But that's about what you can do,
Yeah. And
ignore the
really,
political and the economic.
the better option is to get yourself an investment, like a place that you're going to live in for 4 or 5 years anyway. You know.
Yeah, that would be phenomenal. Like
Mm.
a lot of people's properties went up in value more so than their yearly income over the last 12 months, which that's insane that just about every single person who's a property owner got a bonus year's worth of income.
During such
That's
a
pretty damn
terrible
good.
time as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Should we move on to
so,
part three?
one more point.
Okay.
The median first property buyer, so the median is the most common. I always have trouble saying that in a way that makes sense, but that'll do.
Nope, I gotcha.
Is okay. In Australia is 32. So if you want to become a first property buyer, that's who you're competing with, 32-year-olds. If you look at 32-year-olds, they got far more work and life experience than it's like, it's funny because when you're 18, a 25-year-old seems like they're an adult. But when you're 25, 32-year-olds, they seem like they're adults.
Mm.
Um, all married and stuff. So
Sorted in their commitments and paying their big mortgages.
yeah, yeah. So that's who you're competing with. So like, if you're 23 and it's not going well, just consider that the median property buyer is 9 years older than you.
Mm.
9 years is a long time to get it sorted. Like
Plus,
you've got to get that stable income. You've got to get that. Like I really am a big fan of getting a partner and having romance and all that in your life. Some people are against it, but I don't see how I don't believe that's the way to live. But you got time because most people don't have it figured out until they're 32, and that's pretty good.
mm. Plus, getting a one-bedroom apartment is not only an investment but a sacrifice that you got to make. But it'll be beneficial because when you get to 32, you'll have the way bigger deposit than anyone who just worked. Like,
Oh
pretty
yeah,
much
yeah.
guarantee
If
that.
you can get into the property game well before you're 32, you're so far ahead.
Mm. Which is kind of a weird thing to say because you would expect someone who is 32 to have 3 or 4 properties, but I think that's just not the way to think about
Yeah,
it at
well,
all.
it's because we look at the successful older people. We don't look at
Average.
unsuccessful people and say that that's more like average. You know, we look at people who are doing well and we think that that's how it is. That's,
Mm. Compare yourself to Elon Musk, right?
yeah. So if you got no money after rent and living expenses, that's a problem. You should probably move somewhere cheaper or change jobs. And it sucks. But each week you work and have nothing to show for it is a tragedy. Like
Mm.
I it's you know, you can be someone whose parents brought in a suburb and all the houses in that suburb, quadrupled in value. And then you want to live near where you grew up, but everything's so expensive that you're priced out the market and you got to leave for a while. And that really sucks, but that happens. And, don't wait for the prices to drop. Don't wait for the government to help. Like, I really reckon just do what you can and keep moving.
Mm.
And 10 years is a long time, but within 10 years, you can be able to live wherever you want, essentially.
Yeah. Instead of never being able to do it because you never made decisions, you know?
Yeah, and it does suck. Like, you don't want to change jobs, especially if you enjoy what you do. Um, but if you enjoy what you do and you're not making any money, maybe that's why you enjoy what you do, because maybe it's not as productive as it could be or something like that. There's just this annoying thing that sacrifices are required and it's worth making them.
Yeah, because you get to live a fulfilling life.
Hmm.
Mm.
But on a positive note, now we got the myth of the 30-year mortgage.
Okay.
If you diligently pay down a mortgage in our economy across 30 years, you've essentially been tricked. Like,
Yeah.
like that's a that's a very inefficient way to do things, unfortunately. Properties double in value every 10 years or so. So if you just buy two properties at roughly the same price, in 10 years you can sell one and pay off both mortgages.
Mm.
And there's ways to do this so that you can not get around, so you can take advantage of the way that the tax is set up in our country so that you don't need to pay taxes, so that, you can actually do this.
Yeah.
um, and, you could even sell the second one after it's doubled and you could use the cash for other investments or starting a business. That's why it can be very funny. Like, you could buy two $500,000 houses in 10 years, sell one for 1 million, and maybe have the other one paid off quite considerably. There's a funny thing where there's a lot of people at the moment talking about how they bought their houses have gone up in value by 200 grand. They've secured their position and stuff. They think that they're on pathways to be rich. And for the majority of those people, a divorce is going to wipe them out.
Mm.
That that's it's a really funny world where $200,000 is so much money when you're younger, but when you're older, you know, you can lose that level of money just by getting divorced very, very easily. You can lose more. You can have everything thrown in the chaos and lose it all. Like, um, God, it's a
It's a literal it's a threat. Like it
yeah,
doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be divorce. You could get ill and have medical
yeah. Well, that's it.
expenses out your ass, and it's like, fuck,
Yeah,
if that was going to happen, having a property or not, it's just like,
yeah, you can look at the probability of getting divorced, and it's something like 2 in 3. The probability of getting cancer, the probability of someone you care about very deeply getting cancer, the death of a child, which is one that just ruins people,
hmm,
like, um, going bankrupt if you go into business, losing your job if you work for a company and all that. Like, these probabilities, you add them all up and you're at 100%. So this idea that if by the time you're, 40, you've got an additional $1 million worth of net worth that you can use to help navigate these situations, it's actually the case that you're probably going to need it.
Yeah. It's
Which scary as
concerning,
all hell.
concerning, but
Trouble's
way better
coming.
to have, you know?
Yeah. Um, which that's part of the reason why I think, really getting rich. Like some people picture holidays, I just picture security. And I don't even picture that the security will be enough. Like,
Yeah. And do you think it's doom and gloom because you can't buy it a property for 800,000 when you're 22, 23, or whatever? It's like it's it's not the least of your problems. You got to try and bite off things that you can actually chew, because
mm,
life can get crazy real quick, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a person's downfall or anything like that. You could just get cut off at the knees with sickness just easily, you know?
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Everybody always looks at the person with 4 properties who's, like well dressed, nice haircut, all that sort of stuff, looking good. And they think that can be them. But no one ever looks at a homeless person and goes, fuck, that could be me.
Yeah.
Like, and really you're, I don't know what the rates of homelessness versus high level financial success is, but it may be a 50-50.
Yeah. And
Maybe not quite. I don't know, but
for young people, it's important to understand that the people that are homeless might have even just been a person that didn't want to make the sacrifice to get a one-bedroom apartment to live in there. That might be the difference there, you know? It's like,
yeah, well, you can go down a bad path. There's a thing where you don't want one crisis to become multiple crises, and that can happen quite a lot. So
mm,
before you make a business decision that's gonna eat up your time and energy, you've got to make sure that things are okay in your relationship such that you can do that without ending up broken up or divorced or whatever the term is for your situation. Like if you're going to take on extra work, you've got to make sure that your lower back can handle it. That's always one thing that is often overlooked. Like it's kind of a bit of a meme to have a sore back from working, but it's no joke. like
yeah,
like you
it's awful.
you
Absolutely
hurt your
awful
back and you're in so much trouble.
on so many different levels.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
I was just gonna say just before, because it just came to my mind again, but I'll bring it up now because I can think about it. Uh, if you're worried about getting a property and having a 30-year commitment, you don't have to. You don't have to have it for 30 years.
yeah, yeah, 100%, yeah.
And
Um,
it's a stepping stone. Either it becomes an investment or it becomes your deposit for your next house, you know?
yep.
And good luck trying to be able to get a house without having some form of debt these days. Good luck, you
Mm.
know?
Oh yeah, fuck that. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Um, there's okay, this one. We rent out the apartment now because we're a few years into the journey. And someone once said to my girlfriend that they would never do that, i.e., be a landlord. They had political reasons. They're also a fucking loser, which that's the funniest damn thing about it.
Mm.
Like it's like me saying like I would never be a doctor. I don't think I think we should rely on natural healing, as if I'm ever going to be a doctor. Like like he's like so anyway. This guy had a problem with her being a landlord, and he felt that he should voice his opinion, which wish I was there. But, but anyway, everybody says how good landlords have it. So let's talk about it. So rent will pay most of the second mortgage and expenses. And what you get for that, so you get rent, you provide a place for someone to live in. That's a good thing for society because if someone can't afford to buy a place and you offer them one to rent, that's about as good as it can get.
Yeah.
What else would you do?
That's probably the
Um,
position that you're in right now, anyway.
yeah, yeah. So tenants get a pretty good deal. If a tenant loses their job and stops paying the lease, they just sort of it's a bad mark on your rental record and all of that. But the landlord has to continue paying the mortgage. Just somebody else losing their job could put my house under financial stress. That's the situation we're in.
Mm.
Um, they also get to outsource the cost and responsibility of home maintenance. That's a pretty good deal.
Mm.
There are certain taps or certain pipes that could leak and do damage that could cost me thousands of dollars that the tenant doesn't have to worry about. That's a good thing. If you're in the process of saving for a deposit, really handy not to have those big home maintenance costs that can sneak up on you. Really handy to be able to just outsource them.
Mm.
Um, and because a bad tenant will put your household under financial stress, I think you should look after good tenants. So I saw this in a YouTube video and I agree with it. Never raise rent on good tenants if it can be avoided. Like I pay the water bill for my apartment. Let's say water was to, go up 10 times in price for whatever reason, I'd put the rent up because I'm
Yeah.
paying that bill, but come on.
Yeah.
Like,
Can't have not money
like
for
I,
nothing too much.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But, you know, our tenant's been in there 2 years now, or something like that, 1 year, I don't know. Twice the real estate has asked me to put the rent up, and twice I've said no because it's the rent's always there, it's on time. I'm not looking to make money from rent, if that makes sense. Like if I could make an extra 20, 30, $40 a week from rent, it will increase my yearly income by, a couple $1,000. Good, but whatever. I'm more in that investment because the growth in the price of the apartment, I'm going to use that to finance some stuff in the future.
Mm.
So to have it rented out and have it be covering most of its expenses, I did the numbers on this the other day. It doesn't cover all of the expenses, but the the growth and the price makes it, it's a perfectly fine deal for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think what you should do is if you've got a good tenant, don't raise the price of the rent because some people get trapped in the rent cycle due to bad luck. But in general, wages go up over time. And as people get older and more productive, wages tend to go up in response to their own personal effort.
Mm.
So if you can keep rent at the same level for a good tenant, they may be able to afford buy their own place in the future, maybe once things are going well for them. And I feel like that's the right thing to do. You should never hold anyone down. I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
Um
Don't go
and
into it being greedy.
yeah, like let's say in 10 years the apartment's still rented out and I'm still renting it out at, 2020 rent levels and maybe the market price is double rent by that point,
Mm.
and then he finally moves out. Well, great, I can rent it out, I can get all that, that new market price for the rent, all good. But along the way it's only cost me a little bit of lost rent. Like I don't know, I feel like landlords shouldn't put the rent up every time they get a chance to. I just don't think it's the right way to incentivize good tenants to stick around.
Yeah, I get you. And you want to give the good tenants a chance to do something with their
Mm,
lives and their money.
yeah, and I think most people in general have never trashed a house.
In
Of all the
Australia.
people who, yeah, of all the people who have trashed a house, the majority of them, I think, are in rentals. And if you're constantly putting the rent up and forcing people to look for a better deal, you're rolling the dice on getting one of these people who
Ruin everything.
might end up doing a bit of damage.
Mm.
And like, let's say it's 1 in 1,000. It's like, well, if you have 10 different tenants as opposed to one that you know is good, then that's, you rolled the dice 10 times. Now you're looking at there's a 1% chance that you're going to get one of these bad tenants. I just feel like, why are you rolling the dice on that if you've got a good tenant? So,
It's not worth it. It's really not.
yeah. So, final note: if you have political affiliations that make being a landlord something that you wouldn't do, even though the majority of money being made in this country is coming from the government printing it and then lending it out, and it's showing up in the value of home prices, which, they a lot of times these people who don't like landlords aren't talking about the fact that money's just being made out of thin air. Like this,
Yeah.
like, if you're so worried about someone charging money for a place for someone else to live in, well, wait till you find out people are just making money out of thin air. Like, that's swapping that
Uh,
money for someone else's goods and services that they physically work for. Like, that's way more of a problem as far as I'm concerned. Um, there is this thing. You can be a landlord but not put the rent up, and that's probably the best us fellow communists on the communist podcast that we run can do.
Youre. All right. Do you want me to wrap up?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. So today on the Recreate Meaning podcast, we kind of tried to debunk some of the thinking that, how would I say it, average people would try to tell you that you can't buy a property and you can't make investments. We tried to get underneath that a little bit, tried to break up.
Harmful, harmful myths that stagnate people.
Yeah, and also try and put it into perspective of the fact that some of the things that people tell you to be concerned about when buying a property aren't necessarily as problematic as they seem, and gives you a chance to actually move in the world and make a change for yourself and also prepare you for life. So, I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode, and if you would like to leave us a comment on what you thought was a good point, or if you thought that there was something that we didn't quite cover that much in depth, please let us know down in the comments. And also, if you're liking the content, like and subscribe, etc., all that bullshit. And also download the Unify app, which is down in the description if you want to get more productive with your life. Have a lovely day, everyone.